The rain had already soaked through her sweater when she stumbled into the little cafe on the corner. The place was almost empty, save for the quiet hum of the espresso machine and the faint sound of jazz echoing from the ceiling speakers. Her hands trembled as she clutched her small beige purse like it was her last line of defense. Her mascara had run slightly, her hair was wet, and her breathing came in sharp bursts, the kind that happen when someone's been holding back tears for far too long. For a moment she stood there, lost, fragile, and uncertain whether to stay or run back into the storm she had just escaped. Then a soft voice came from behind the counter. "Take a seat, miss," said the young man wearing a dark gray apron. "You look like you've been through a lot." She hesitated, her brown eyes wide with suspicion, but eventually slid into the corner booth by the window. The waiter brought her a steaming mug of cocoa without her asking for it. She wrapped her cold fingers around it, watching the tiny ripples on the surface as if they could somehow answer all the questions that haunted her. "If you believe in kindness, in forgiveness, and in second chances, then please take a moment right now to like, share, and subscribe." Stories like this one remind us that even the smallest act of compassion can change a life forever. Her name was Clara. She had come to the city 3 years ago with big dreams and a small suitcase. Life had been harsh since the beginning, but she had managed to survive, working as an assistant in an office where smiles were fake and kindness was transactional. Tonight, however, she had nowhere else to go. Her relationship had ended in a storm of accusations and betrayal. The man she thought she could trust had left her broken, and the words he'd thrown at her were still echoing in her mind. The cafe became her temporary refuge. Night after night, she would come there after work, ordering the cheapest drink on the menu and sitting in. Silence until closing. She never said much, but the waiter, whose name she learned was Ethan, noticed her. He never pried, never questioned, but somehow always made sure her cup was full, her corner warm, and her eyes met with quiet reassurance. Clara didn't know what to think of him. He seemed gentle, but in her world, gentleness had always come with conditions. The last person who had treated her kindly had turned that kindness into control. So even when Ethan smiled, she held her guard high. Trust, to her, was a luxury she could no longer afford. Still, she kept returning to that cafe. Not because of the coffee, but because for a few hours every evening, she could sit in a place where the world wasn't trying to break her. It was late one evening when the story began to shift. The cafe was nearly empty. Rain once again painted streaks on the glass, and the city lights shimmered in reflection. Clara was sitting in her usual corner when Ethan came over to collect her empty cup. "You okay tonight?" he asked softly. She nodded quickly, though her voice trembled when she replied, "I'm fine, just tired." But he could tell she wasn't fine. There were faint bruises near her wrist, the kind that weren't accidental. And when her phone buzzed and she glanced at the name flashing on the screen, her face went pale. She silenced it instantly and tucked it away. Ethan didn't ask questions. Instead, he walked back behind the counter, pulled out a small notebook, and wrote something on a napkin. When he came back, he placed it beside her cup. "If you ever need help, real help, just stay here after closing. I'll listen." That night, Clara didn't stay, but she also didn't sleep. 2 nights later, she came again, eyes red, heart heavy, body trembling. She waited until the cafe emptied and the lights dimmed. Ethan wiped the last table, turned the open sign to closed, and quietly took off his apron. Then, without a word, he sat across from her. For a long time, she said, "Nothing." The rain tapped gently against the window, and the smell of freshly ground coffee filled the silence between them. Finally, she spoke, her voice cracking under the weight of her pain. "I don't even know why I'm here," she whispered. "You're just a stranger, and I'm tired of people pretending to care." Ethan didn't respond right away. He simply looked at her, not with pity but with understanding. "You're right," he said after a pause. "I am a stranger. But sometimes it's easier to tell your truth to someone who doesn't expect anything from you." Her eyes filled with tears. "I just don't want anyone to take advantage of me again," she said, clutching her purse tightly against her chest. "Please, don't be like the others." He leaned forward, his voice steady and sincere. "Clara," he said, "I don't want anything from you. I'd rather protect you than hurt you." that's all." Something inside her broke at those words, not from pain but from relief. She'd been holding her fear for so long that she had forgotten what safety even felt like. That night, they talked until the streetlights began to fade. She told him about her past, the small town she left, the promises that turned into lies, and the love that became a wound. Ethan listened without interrupting, his eyes reflecting the weight of her sorrow. When she cried, he didn't reach out to touch her. He simply stayed there, steady, present, and patient. Days turned into weeks. Every evening, Clara came to the cafe, sometimes smiling, sometimes crying, but always a little lighter than before. Ethan continued his quiet routine, serving coffee by day, listening by night. One evening, she noticed he had bandages on his hand. When she asked, he shrugged it off. Later, she found out from another barista that Ethan had gotten into a fight defending a homeless man from a group of troublemakers outside the cafe. He never mentioned it to her, but something in her heart shifted when she learned that. For the first time in years, she believed there were still good men in the world. But healing isn't a straight line. One night, she came in later than usual, her eyes swollen from crying. She sat down and whispered, "He found me." Her ex had tracked her down. She was terrified. Ethan didn't say a word. He locked the cafe doors and turned off the lights, leaving only the soft glow from the counter. "You're safe here," he said quietly. "He won't touch you again." She shook her head, her voice trembling. "You don't understand what he's capable of." "I understand enough," Ethan interrupted gently, "and I'm not letting you go through this alone." He called a friend who worked in law enforcement, arranged a temporary protective order, and helped Clara find a safe place to stay. For the first time, someone didn't tell her she was overreacting. Someone believed her. Weeks later, when things finally began to calm down, Clara returned to the cafe with a soft smile on her face. She looked different, stronger, more at peace. She had started therapy, moved into her own apartment, and was beginning to rebuild her life. Ethan greeted her with his usual warm smile, though there was something bittersweet in his eyes. "You did it," he said softly. "You found your strength." She looked at him with tears brimming again. "You helped me find it." They sat together after closing once more. Just like that first night, the silence between them wasn't heavy anymore. It was comforting. Outside, the world continued its endless rush, but inside the cafe, time seemed to slow down. "I used to think people like you didn't exist," Clara said quietly. "People who help without wanting something in return." Ethan smiled faintly. "Maybe I used to think the same about people like you, the ones who survive, who keep going even after everything." The moment lingered, soft and delicate, as though the universe itself wanted to protect it. She reached across the table, placed her hand over his, and whispered, "Thank you for not giving up on me." He looked at her with quiet sincerity. "You did that yourself. I just reminded you that you could." Months passed, and their bond deepened into something that went beyond words. It wasn't the kind of love built on grand gestures or confessions. It was built on shared silences, on mutual respect, on the small, consistent acts of care that heal broken hearts more than any promise ever could. Clara eventually stopped coming to the cafe every day, not because she didn't need Ethan anymore, but because she had found her footing. She was finally living again. Yet every once in a while she would stop by, order her usual cocoa, and smile knowingly at the man behind the counter. The cafe had once been her hiding place, but now it was her reminder of hope, of kindness, of how a stranger's compassion can change the course of a broken life. And sometimes when the cafe closed for the night, Ethan would still sit in that same booth, remembering the girl who once walked in drenched in rain and fear, and left with the strength to stand tall again. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that goodness still exists in this world, please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Your support helps more stories of love, healing, and second chances reach those who need them most. Before you go, comment below, "I still believe in kindness."